last race I got a situation where lockout disappeared and it kept me wondering, am I really going slower in a fully open position? Yes, I saw Dylan Johnson's video about this topic and it didn't convince me 100%. While it included some scientific research screenshots in the video, the test itself was not with enough variability because every take was being done 2 times in a row, and then at the end of the day, at the end of testing, you are already not knowing whether the higher heart rate came out because you are already tired or because of that specific scenario. Also, going on the tarmac does not reflect the actual nature of mountain biking, so that's exactly the reason why I made my altered version of testing, reflecting the nature of riding on full suspension bike in order to see whether it makes a difference or not. This test will be done slightly above my FTP, so that means I will have to push pretty hard in order to keep the bike moving uphill. So we'll see how it will end up. So the life gives you lemons.
Make some videos based on that. And even though the saying is just because it feels faster doesn't mean it is, it's not true. If you feel it to be harder, that means you will fatigue faster. And it's not only mental.
So sorry coach, today's workout might suffer a bit. It's for the good cause. I'm going to do 8 intervals and they will be 3 minutes long. One case will be fully locked while sitting, other fully unlocked while sitting, then the same thing when standing, for different scenarios, each for 2 times. Actually, I didn't manage to fix my lockout just yet, but I found a temporary solution which either holds it in place or fully unlocks. That will be enough for the test to prove it that suspension lockout works firmly. You can see that now it's locked, so it doesn't move. The front is not moving as well. So we have fully working lockout. Let's go into the practice. We will see how it goes.
Oh, and actually, in order to be transparent, I will leave the bottle.
Talking about looking, you can get a sense how and where I'm going to do those uphill efforts. It begins with a single track uphill, then it moves into a walk path uphill with sections from 15 to 20 degrees gradient, so that's pretty much of an effort. The terrain here is not too loose, and then at the end of a segment where it's a bit flatter section but still slightly going up. The aim of this video is to figure out whether going on full suspension bike at the same power outputs in different scenarios can generate your body harder effort, or you will be just slower in one or other scenario. In essence, it's to figure out whether you actually need lockout, or maybe you just can throw it away. Who knows? Few details to add about what you can see on the screen. At the top bar, there's a progress of whole riding and benchmark, as well as the segment which I'm going. Based on the Strava, the segment interval, the testing scenario, so either it's seated, standard, or locked or open, all the data from heart rate to watts, cadence, speed, and the gradient of the climb.
I plan on making some comments while riding, but better not.
All the shots are perfectly seen from the beginning of the interval. Every difference you will see reflects actual movement and actual time and distance traveled through the interval. So let's just see what it unveils. As in total it had 8 takes, 4 different scenarios. I changed the camera after the first batch, but keep in mind that every new batch was done in different order. If I started at seated locked in the first batch, in the next it was seated open, and it just varied in order not to have one after another takes, which in my opinion, readjust results not in your favor. After every 3 minutes climb, I had 4 minutes rest, and it was more or less enough. I almost went over the time 2 times when I changed the camera's angle, but every single time I started at the most of 4 minutes rest. One of the hardest things to do these tests is to make sure that first you are rested equally, and at the same time you are not moving too fast or too slow. As a potential solution, it could be a standing start, but then you introduce possibility of clipping in. So at least in my opinion, it's better to go with rolling start and just try to match it as close as possible. So about the findings, I'm still not sure what I have captured, but I am pretty sure that the results are pretty close, except one thing which we'll cover after looking at the data, so we'll see. 8x, 350 watts, 3 minutes each. I done it. I opened the Strava after getting back at home and I was like completely surprised. It's worth mentioning that the segment was a bit shorter, so like 10 seconds less than the actual interval, and I have interval data as well separately. Looking at the Strava data, those few seconds here and there are completely irrelevant. Keep in mind that the power was not precisely the same, and also in Strava power is a bit smaller in compared to what Garmin will show, and you will see that difference later down the road. But the most important factor, even from this initial overview, is heart rate. The heart rate was mostly affected in open cases than I was standing. So looking at that Strava data, it already gives us an indication that if you go at the similar power output, it won't make you slower. And we can also prove that information from the distance lap, where I take data from the laps from the Garmin. Even though there was some variation in the middle, somewhere I've been a bit slower at the specific section of the segment, but at the end of the day, because I tried to maintain similar power, I added a bit more watts in other section. More or less towards the end, the line just moves out, meaning that the distance traveled was more or less closer or even identical in every different scenario. The speed in the beginning was not ideal because there was some variability. In some places I was maybe a bit too fast in the beginning, in others too slow. By adding slightly more power, everything just moves out. Power output needed was more or less based on the terrain, because there were a few steeper sections, or in other cases, then you can see that the average does not match what you are trying to achieve. You just add a little more. Going on off-roading compared to tarmac gives you that additional variability, which in one sense is not good for the end results, but in the other it just reflects more what mountain biking nature is about. That's the reason why I chosen to do that. Yeah, it might affect things a bit, but for my favor and not against mine. Those are different topics. Basically anyone can do those tests, make sure that they are perfectly aligned and fought and all that stuff, but then making sense of that data is a different story. And talking about the sense of the data with Atherstats, and it just helps to get a sense of the data a bit more. I made all those visualizations, easily outline basically any data in the way I want. In these scenarios, the white line reflects standing position, black line goes for seated, as well as the square with letter L indicates that it was locked, and letter O, it was open. It's also animated in time based on the time I've been doing that in the course. We already answered one question. No, it won't be slower if you go at the same power output with open position. As with everything, it has to come with some cost. And what that cost is? Well, based on my assumption, it's the heart rate. Whenever you go open, your heart rate will be higher than standing. Now, whether it's a result of you going lower cadence, it's something to test out in the future. Ideally, to close this topic down, it would be needed to test at the same cadence, and that way you will know. But nonetheless, I can guarantee you more or less that your heart rate will be few beats higher than going in open position. And even though you might say, hey, the black lines where you go seated with open goes down at the end, well, it just goes down at the end, but the average was still higher than going with open positions. And as my assumption was in the beginning, if you go at least few beats higher, at the end of the day, during the race duration, you will get fatigued faster. Even though those topics are a bit different, we are talking firstly about the power, then we're moving to the heart rate and fatigue. But in the end of the day, that's exactly the reason what I try to figure out. In my opinion, with the help of Atherstats graphs, we can visually see that if you go with fully open position and you even introduce standing, it just drains your energy fast, increases your heart rate, and in the end of the day, it does not give you any favor. Keep in mind that here we're not talking about technical climbing. Even though it was an uphill on off-road, it has nothing to do with technical features which you might stumble across. That's a different topic, and I have video coming explaining this a bit as well. It took me almost a year to figure out how to ride full suspension bike.
All right, and the last one, standing closed.